Thanks so much for everyone who has set aside a little bit of your day to join us for the webinar. Today's topic, conducting classroom assessments with iPad. So the agenda today, we're going to talk about a few different elements of conducting assessments with iPad. First off, a brief introduction to JAMF Software and the Casper Suite. If this is the first time you've interacted with JAMF or the first time you've seen the Casper Suite, hopefully this gives you just a little bit of context for what we're going to talk about today. Then we'll discuss the different types of classroom assessments that we typically see. We'll talk about how you can prepare iPad for use in the classroom. We'll touch on mobile device management, or MDM, and how that fits into the classroom assessment workflow. And then finally, we'll talk about Casper Focus, which is an app that's included in the Casper Suite designed for teachers, and how all these pieces fit together to make assessments in the classroom with iPad a breeze. Finally, we will have a brief demo towards the end of the session today. And again, I'll try to answer as many questions as I can so that we can help you out. Of course, as we go through, if there's more questions or if you want more detail, we always encourage you to get in touch with us so that we can help you individually, and I'll share a couple ways you can do that at the end of the session here today. So who is JAMF Software? Well, since we got started in 2002, we've had one simple mission. We're helping organizations succeed with Apple. And today, we're really going to focus on how we can help schools succeed with Apple. Because we know that as long as Apple has been in business, schools have been putting Apple technology to work in the classroom. Today, we're really going to focus on the iPad, which is an incredibly powerful teaching tool, and it allows teachers and students to interact with their lessons and to create really engaging, unique content in a way that's simply not possible with other more traditional types of computers. But of course, we know that as powerful and as simple to use as an iPad can be, when you're dealing with hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of iPads in a school, there's always going to be certain requirements for more complex management capabilities, and that's where we come in. Our Casper Suite solution is built for managing Apple devices. This is the end-to-end life cycle management tool for Mac, iPad, and iPhone. Again, today we're going to really focus on iPad, but if you also have Mac or iPhone at your school, with one instance of the Casper Suite, you can manage all of those Apple devices. The Casper Suite is built up of a few different components. Today we're going to talk about the JAMF Software Server, or JSS. You can think of this as the brains of the Casper Suite. The JSS is a server-based component that runs on kind of standard web technologies, and it interacts with all of the mobile devices, the iPads that you're managing, and it also gives you a web interface where you as an IT administrator can interact with the Casper Suite. Then we'll also talk about a few of the client apps, or the apps that we're going to install on the iPad as part of this solution. So first up, the colorful app right next to the JSS logo, that's the logo for Casper Focus. Again, we'll talk more about Casper Focus in detail, but this is an app designed for teachers that communicates with the JSS. Next to that is self-service. Self-service is an on-demand app catalog. Again, we'll dive into more details. All of these together make up the Casper Suite, and all of these are included when we talk about the Casper Suite solution. Again, the JSS as a server-based component can present to you with your web interface. That's what we see on the left there with the nice blue screens. We'll look at this just a little bit today. Important to know, because it's a web-based tool, you can interact with this from a Mac, from a Windows machine, from an iPad or an iPhone, really anything that can support a modern web browser. The server itself can be deployed either to an on-premise server that can be running OS X server, Windows server, or Linux server technologies. And we offer JAMF Cloud, which is a hosted solution so that you can let us worry about managing all the servers, and you can just focus on managing the devices and helping your teachers and students. So there's a brief overview of the Casper Suite. Again, if you're interested in seeing a more broad demo of everything that the Casper Suite can do, again, we'd be happy to connect you with an engineer who can give you a more tailored demo at a later date. So let's talk about assessments in the classroom. When we think about the different types of assessments, there's really, I like to break this down into kind of three broad categories. So one is kind of the everyday type of assessments. While a teacher is going through a lesson, it's the type of assessment that asks, are the students comprehending? Are they engaged? It might be as simple as a one question true or false engagement. You can think of this as how some teachers use clickers or other tools for on-demand interactive feedback. We can do the same type of workflow using an iPad. Then when it comes time for routine tests and quizzes, the type of thing that you might do throughout the semester or checking at the end of a lesson for comprehension. Routine tests and quizzes, of course, can be done through an iPad, and we're going to talk about a few different ways that you can do that. And then we know that a lot of schools are adopting some variety of high-stakes exams. So one example of that, PARC, is one of the organizations that's being used here in the U.S., with a lot of states are adopting standardized testing for different grade levels. For schools, this has been a challenge because suddenly all the schools in a district or even all the schools in a state are required to adopt a very specific technology solution to implement these exams. Now, what I'd recommend is, as we think about assessments in the classroom, if we standardize on using the same types of technology and the same types of workflow, today we're really going to focus on how you can do this with iPad. The benefits are, for a teacher, they don't have to worry about bringing in some new technology or getting all their students from the classroom to a specific testing lab when it's time to take an exam. The teachers can be using these tools and technologies throughout the year as part of their regular teaching program. And this takes a lot of pressure off the students as well, because they don't have to be worried about the pressure of exam day when they're using their iPad for everyday routine assessments throughout the year. It makes it that much easier. So let's talk about how we do this. How can we prepare the iPad for use in a classroom setting? Again, the first thing we'll talk about is mobile device management, or MDM, and the role of supervision. Then we'll touch on how you can deploy and configure new iPads, how you can purchase and deploy apps, and then we'll touch briefly on keyboards as well. First up, preparing the iPad. So how does MDM, or mobile device management, and supervision fit into the classroom workflow? From a broad perspective, we can think of mobile device management as the tools and technologies that we use for three core functions. Inventory, so knowing about all of the data about the iPads that are deployed in your school. Deployment, again, we'll talk about deployment in just a moment. That's the idea of getting new devices, new iPads ready to use, or deploying new apps and content to those iPads. And configuration. And configuration can include everything from how do we get the secure Wi-Fi connection set up on an iPad, how do we secure that iPad with a passcode, or how do we think about certain restrictions that we're going to want to apply as part of a assessment workflow. And since I mentioned supervision, this is an important point when we talk about using iPad for classroom assessments, that supervision is a subset of of MDM, or it's a way to take MDM to the fullest extent. Supervision is available for iPads that are owned by your organization, by your school, and you can enable supervision using the Apple Device Enrollment Program, which leads us right into our next topic. So, the Apple Device Enrollment Program is the easiest and most efficient way to deploy and configure new iPads. DEP, as it's sometimes abbreviated, it ties in with the Casper Suite, so you have ongoing management, ongoing inventory, and really simple automated deployment with the Apple Device Enrollment Program. This is now available in dozens of countries around the world, and I know that lots of our customers have begun using this because it is such a streamlined workflow. Now, there are, of course, other ways to do enrollment. It's not exclusively through Device Enrollment Program, but I'm going to highlight that today because that's, in our experience, really the best workflow that you have for setting up iPads in the classroom. And then a couple of the things that we'll touch on here, Wi-Fi connectivity, absolutely critical. If you haven't done this yet, I really encourage you to work with the network infrastructure folks in your school and make sure that the Wi-Fi connectivity is robust and secure and ready to support iPad. And then last is configuration and security. So we know that when it comes time to do assessments, there are certain configurations that are either recommended or sometimes mandatory as part of those assessment tools. And of course, we want to make sure that we have a secure platform for conducting assessments. So one more little detail about the Device Enrollment Program. This is a brief overview of how the Device Enrollment Program interacts with your local MDM server, in our case the JSS, JAMF Software server, with Apple's cloud services of the Device Enrollment Program that's globally available, and with the iPads that you're going to be setting up. So let's take a quick look of how this works. The first thing you'll do is you will connect your school's MDM server with the Apple Device Enrollment Program. That makes an association that tells Apple all the devices that your school owns will now be managed by this specific server. Then, when you have a new device, it's going to check in with Apple as part of its activation process. Apple will then return the enrollment details for your MDM server so that that device knows where to find its MDM server. The iPad will enroll itself with the MDM server, and finally, all the configuration and security tasks that you've assigned will automatically be applied as part of that configuration. So this is a 10,000-foot view of how this works. The reason that we are recommending Device Enrollment Program is that this allows you to do that supervision step that I mentioned a moment ago, which is really important if you're going to be doing any of the secure assessments with iPad. And this allows you to do enrollment in a way that's mostly automated. So you don't have to have a trained IT person going through each iPad and individually setting up by tapping on the glass. Instead, you can define how you want the enrollment to take place, and you can use the Device Enrollment Program to automate most of these steps. Once we have the iPads deployed, now we want to think about deploying apps, purchasing and deploying apps. And this is where we'll use another Apple program called the Volume Purchase Program, or VPP. As of today, it does require that you have an Apple ID for each of the students who's going to be assigned that app, or that app license. That will be changing. We expect that more information from Apple later this fall, possibly even right now. I know they're having a special event today. So this is something that will be more flexible in the future. And this is where we can take advantage of our self-service app catalog. So think of the self-service app catalog as your your school's personally tailored catalog of apps, books, and even settings. This provides on-demand access for students, teachers, and staff so that they can choose which apps they want to install and install that on their own without having to file an IT help ticket or without needing any special permissions. And when you set up the self-service app catalog, you can use your existing groups, classes, and departments so that each department gets just the apps that are appropriate for them. Or you could even do that by grade level so that a 5th grade student would see apps that are appropriate for 5th grade, but not those that are designed for high school or older students. And last, when we think about preparing the iPad, think about keyboards. I know it seems like kind of a boring topic, but in some of the testing apps that we've looked at, keyboards are required as part of the testing setup. The advantage of an external keyboard on an iPad is that it offers, you get the full screen of the iPad available for the testing content. And for some students, especially if you're going to be typing for a longer exam or writing more in-depth responses, some students just find the external keyboard easier to type with. I know today, just this morning, Apple just announced with the new iPad Pro that they're also offering a new keyboard attachment that will work with iPad Pro. But if you have iPads in your classroom today and you're looking at keyboard solutions, I'd encourage you to check out this one. Logitech makes a wired USB keyboard that's really designed around the needs of schools. It plugs into the iPad through the Lightning port. It makes it super simple to set up because as soon as you plug it in, it's ready to go, and you don't have to worry about joining any or syncing any Bluetooth connectivity. All right, the last piece of our solution, Casper Focus. Casper Focus is an app that's designed for teachers, and it gives teachers access to the power of MDM to do certain tasks that are appropriate for classroom management. So it helps them to navigate throughout a lesson plan with their students. They can focus a student on a specific app. They can have another student sharing their iPad out through the Apple TV to share the work with the class. And they can send a message to a group of students or an individual student asking for attention up front or sending another personalized message. This also is an important tool in our assessment workflow because it gives the teachers the ability to focus the students on one app at a time so that they can complete the assessment without being distracted by other apps or without having the opportunity to go and Google for the answer, for example. So now let's take a look at how we can put all of these technologies together, and we're going to look at the solution with the Casper Suite. All right. The first thing we're going to look at is I'm actually going to log into the JAMF Software server, the JSS. And when I log into the JSS, what I can get here is this is where I'm going to access my IT admin console for the Casper Suite. Since we're talking about iPads today, I'm going to start by creating a few configuration profiles that I'm going to use for the iPad. Now, I mentioned before, this can be used for things like your secure Wi-Fi settings. If you want to deploy any accounts, like email accounts, you can do that here as well. But for today, I'm going to focus on some of the features that are related specifically to assessments. Apple's been working with schools around the world to solicit their feedback on what are the key features that schools need to be able to conduct assessments with iPad. And a few of those are available in the configuration profile listed under restrictions. So the idea here is that during an exam, I want to turn off certain functionality on the iPad to take away any possibility that a student's going to be distracted or that they're going to have outside help on that exam. So for example, you can disable things like the camera or taking screenshots. I could disable AirDrop so that students can't pass files back and forth. I can also disable iMessage or Siri so that those can be turned off. At the bottom of the screen here, these are relatively new, and these were based on direct feedback from educators that they're looking for a way to disable some of the really handy features on the iPad, like the predictive keyboard, autocorrection, spelling check, or the definition lookup through the dictionary tool. Now, most of the time, these tools are going to be really handy and useful features that we all use every day, maybe without even realizing it. But if you're doing an assessment on a student's writing ability, you want to test them on their writing ability, not on their ability to use the dictionary lookup tool or the autocorrection for fixing spelling errors. So with the Casper Suite, you can choose how you want to configure the devices, and then I can choose specific devices to apply this to, or I can have groups of devices or groups of users that I'm going to apply it to. So for example, I could say I want this to go to all of the iPads in my school, or I could choose a specific class or subset of classes that I'm going to apply this to. The configurations are deployed over the air, so it's going through your wireless network, and with the Casper Suite, you can always remove those just as easily. So when the exam is done or when we're back to normal use mode, I can remove these profiles from my devices. So there's a quick view of how we can use the Casper Suite with configuration profiles as part of our assessments. The other thing we're going to look at today is what does it look like for students and teachers. So I have two iPads here in front of me. The one on the left with the white border, this is my teacher's iPad, and the one on the right is an example of a student's iPad. And here we're going to show you what you can do with Casper Focus to help with the assessment workflow. So if you look on the left side, I'm going to launch Casper Focus, and this is what you might see in a typical classroom. Here, I've got my set of 12 iPads. Now, if these are assigned to students, of course, you would see the student's name next to each one, making it easy to identify which one is which. And if you want to, you can create groups or custom groups if you have different students working on different projects in the day. Now, for simplicity, I'm just going to focus on my one iPad that I have next to me right now and show you what we can do with Casper Focus as it relates to assessments. So the first thing I'm going to do is, as part of my classroom setup, I'm going to do a quick assessment to make sure that my students are following on the lesson that we've been doing. So what just happened there is this iPad, the one with the black border, is now focused on the Socrative student app. This is an example of an education app that a teacher could use for quick on-demand quizzes or feedback. Here I'm doing a 5-question quiz all about geography. Just as easily, I could do a simple true-false or multiple-choice assessment, and I might do this throughout the class period. What's nice about this is that without having to ask each student to launch the app individually, find it on their iPad, a teacher can launch this for them on their iPad, and then again, as a teacher, I can just remove that focus. The app will stay up, so the student can continue working on this quiz, and as soon as they're done, they can go back to whatever it is they're working on. So there's a quick example of how we can use Casper Focus to focus on an education app as part of an assessment. Now, as another example, we can also do a similar thing with websites. So I might be teaching a math lesson, and I might have a few students who are working ahead of the class who I want them to focus on kind of building their mastery of some of the math topics we just talked about. So I can focus them on on a website that offers some of the math skill training. They can navigate throughout this website, but this gives me a way to focus them to one website at a time where they can work on this on their own pace. Here, again, this could be, I'm showing an example of some math practice exams. This could just as easily be if you're using Edmodo or another one of the educational websites, you could have whatever type of assessment website that you're focusing your students on. Let's see if I can get this right. 7.2. All right, I've got my 5th grade math skills intact. And now, again, from the teacher side, I can remove focus, and what that will do is the students can continue working if they like, but it gives them the ability then to go on and do other work. And just to prove that I'm really doing this live, and sometimes my Wi-Fi down here doesn't work so well, there we go. Now, the other thing the other tool within Casper Focus that can be helpful during assessment time is the ability to get students, to gather students' attentions all at once. So, for example, if we're doing a more in-depth type of assessment that's not focused on just one app or one website, maybe my assessment is that I'm asking my students to create a 5-minute video about one of the topics in class, or I've asked my students to make an iBook or a rich media content where they're navigating among different apps on the iPad. When it's time to gather attention back up front, I can use Casper Focus to send a message either to all of the students at once or to a subset or a group of students. And what this will do is it will display a message on their screen that I can customize, and again, this is the equivalent of saying pencils down when we're done with that assessment or that activity. And now I will remove that and go back. Now, last, since we talked about the high stakes exam, this is going to be this will depend on which of the testing groups that your school is affiliated with. But one of those that we've seen through PARC is an app that's made by Pearson called TestNav. And what I can do here, I can use Casper Focus. Again, there's going to be 2 parts to this. The first was that configuration that I created a moment ago that turns off some of the auto spell check and dictionary lookup tools. And then the other is I can use Casper Focus to focus my students on TestNav. If I hit that, this will launch TestNav on the iPads. And it will launch iPad. Okay. My live demo, I didn't get lucky today with my live demo. But with a more robust network than the one I have right now, I could use this to focus everyone on that TestNav app, and then they could use that for their secure assessment. So this has been a very brief tour of some of the capabilities with the Casper Suite, with Casper Focus, and combining some of these tools to provide different types of assessments with an iPad. I want to encourage you, if you haven't yet, please check out JAMF Nation. You can find this at jamfnation.com, and what you'll find there are other IT professionals, many of whom are working in an education organization, where you can ask questions, share your experiences, and get real best practices from other IT professionals who are doing this day in and day out. And if you're not yet using the Casper Suite and you'd like to get more information or get a more personalized demo for your environment, if you head to jamfsoftware.com, right across the top of the bar, you can get in touch with us. You can chat, email, or call. You can request a trial so you can actually put this into work in your environment. Or if you'd like to, you can have a more personalized demo with one of our engineers who can speak more specifically to the needs that you have. So with that, let me take a pause here and I will try to answer as many of the questions as I can that have come in during the webinar. All right. All right, so the first question, this one came from Wayne, and Wayne asked about what about bring your own device? So if you're using a bring your own device program at school. Great question, Wayne. So the supervision concept is really intended for institutionally owned devices. This is because with MDM management, you have more control over that device, which is intended for those institutionally owned devices. Now, depending on the agreements that you have with students and their parents on how you're using BYOD iPads, you could still apply the same management concepts to that. Supervising a device does require that it's wiped as part of the supervision process, so you'd have to work that out as you do your kind of onboarding of new students. And but from what I showed you today, with the exception of the Casper Focus feature set, you can still enroll BYOD iPads with the Casper Suite. You can still get inventory. You can still offer that self-service app catalog. But without supervision, the Casper Focus features I showed you, where a teacher is able to focus on a specific app, those would not work without supervision. All right. So let's see. Anne had a question about iPads showing up as managed. Okay, so it looks like Anne had a question. Anne might be using the Casper Suite already, but a question about what happens if you have an iPad that is no longer being managed. So that's a good question. With an iPad, depending on how it's set up, there is if you or if a student or a teacher were to go into the settings, they could remove the management profile from that iPad. Again, that's if you're doing it through the device enrollment program. One of the advantages is that you can essentially lock that profile to the iPad. But if you're enrolling it in other ways without device enrollment program, iPads, of course, can be unmanaged again. If you find yourself in that situation, you can always enroll again. One of the things you can do with the Casper Suite is you can simply point an iPad at an enrollment URL. So you would type in the web address of your JAMF Software server /enroll, and you can re-enroll that device if it ever loses or if it's ever unenrolled or unmanaged. But it sounds like, Anne, if you are a current customer today, of course, you also have a friendly JAMF support specialist on the other side of the line who can help you with specific questions as well. Okay, Charles has a question. So Charles sounds like had just downloaded Casper Focus, and when he launches it, he sees a screen that's asking for the JSS URL. So great question. So Charles, the JSS URL, that's the internet address or the web address of your Casper Suite server, of your school server. If you weren't involved in that setup, probably someone at your school, someone who was setting that up in the IT department would have that URL for you. Or if you're not yet using the Casper Suite, of course, we would be happy to set you up with a demo so you can experience Casper Focus and see if it's going to work well for you. But on that first launch, if you download Casper Focus from the App Store, the very first time you launch it, it will ask for the URL of your JAMF Software server. All right, Robin asked about the Logitech keyboard I mentioned. So if the Logitech keyboard is wired, where does it plug in on the iPad? Yeah, so the Logitech keyboard that I mentioned, it's a USB keyboard that connects over Lightning. So the same Lightning connector that you would use to charge the iPad, you can plug the keyboard directly in there. And the great thing with that is that it's, as soon as you plug it in, it's ready to use. And of course, it doesn't really matter which iPad is connected to which keyboard if you switch from day to day, because there's no concept of pairing like we have on Bluetooth. So if you're interested in that, I can't remember the exact model name, but if you go to Logitech and search for Lightning keyboard, that's the keyboard that you can plug in. Anne asked, how do you get Casper Focus on the teacher iPads? Anne, perfect question. Using the Casper Suite, you can push out an app to the teacher's iPads, assuming they're managed by the Casper Suite, or you can put Casper Focus in the self-service app catalog. So if you have some teachers that are using Casper Focus, but some that prefer not to, you can put that in self-service and then they can choose whether or not they want to install that. Or if all the teachers in your school are going to be using it, you can simply push that app using the Casper Suite to get it in the hands of teachers. Claire asked, does this work with shared iPads? So the ones that are not one-to-one, not assigned to a specific student. So the key to what I showed you today with this workflow is the supervision. And again, supervision can be done through the device enrollment program, or it can be done with Apple Configurator. But our recommendation is to use device enrollment program. That would work, so that same workflow would work on a shared iPad model. So if you have a cart of iPads that are going to be shared with different students throughout the school week or school year, we can do that same workflow. The key is that these iPads are managed by the Casper Suite and supervised as part of the deployment using Apple Deployment Program. Or sorry, the Device Enrollment Program is what I just meant. All right, Harry asked, can you make groups for different classes or grades? Absolutely. So the example I showed you, obviously a very simple example where I have one teacher iPad managing one student iPad. But in a school where you have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of devices, you can organize those into groups by classes, by grade levels, however that makes sense. And within Casper Focus, when each teacher who logs into Casper Focus will only see the classes that they are assigned to. So if you do have iPads that are assigned to a specific student, and you can make those assignments where we have the teacher, the classes throughout the day, and then the iPads of the students in those classes. And I should also mention the Casper Suite can integrate with your directory service. So if you're using Active Directory, Open Directory, or another LDAP compliant directory service, the Casper Suite can pull in those groups and you can use the existing groups that you've already defined for your users. All right, Adam has a question about iOS 9 and the new multitasking features and how would that affect Casper Focus. Adam, great question. I don't have a complete answer for that yet because iOS 9 is not yet released. It will be very soon. In fact, I imagine while we've been talking, Apple has made some more announcements on that. We're dedicated to supporting all the new features with new Apple operating systems. So we'll be continuing to add that, but I can't comment on exactly what that will mean for Casper Focus yet at this time. But stay tuned. We will have more updates once iOS 9 is released to the public. So Tricia asked if it's possible to choose different configuration profiles from Casper Focus. Tricia, good question. Right now, Casper Focus is really centered on the key features I showed you of focusing on apps, on websites, the attention screen, and you can also clear a passcode. At this point, you cannot assign configuration profiles from Casper Focus. Of course, because it's a web console, you could just as easily pull up the JSS web console on your iPad, and then you could make those configuration profile assignments there. But you can't do that directly in Casper Focus today. All right, and Lori asked, when you use Casper Focus to focus a student on, and you get the red exclamation mark on their device, what does that mean? So you might have noticed I had an error on mine today during the demo. If for some reason the iPad is not able to communicate with the Casper Suite server, which could be the case if they are outside of the network range, or occasionally these, if network connectivity momentarily drops, this can happen as well. What that means is just that it was not able to focus that student. But what you can do is you can just you can choose it to focus it again. And in my experience, if you have a network that is that has intermittent connectivity, like the one that I'm working on right now, that does happen occasionally. But you can always just refocus that student, and it will pick up right where you left off. All right. I think we actually got through most of these. Oh, a couple more coming in. Hold the phone. So Lori's got a great question. When you're doing training with your teachers on how to use Casper Focus, can you make a teacher into a student for the training courses? So yes, the nice thing with the way that the way this technology works is I can just as easily be a teacher or a student on the same iPad. So if you're doing a training course on training your teachers how to use Casper Focus, you could set it up and have, in a small group, you could have one teacher be the teacher and the other teachers be the students. And of course, you could share that responsibility around the class. My only caution is, because I've done this myself, is if you ever focus yourself. So if you are the teacher and you also focus yourself as a student, you can then you can lock yourself into an app, and then you would be left until the class period that you defined expired. But good question. So yes, for training, you can make teachers into students so that they can experience from the other side, from the student's perspective, of what it feels like to work with an iPad in that context. All right. Well, thank you so much. We are about 3/4 past the hour. I want to say thank you to everyone who has carved out time in your day to join us for this webinar. Now, obviously, this is a brief summary of some of the workflows that you can use with iPad in the classroom, and thinking about ways to use that as part of your assessment toolkit. There's lots more information you can find at JAMF Nation, our user community. If you want to get a more personalized demo for your schools and talk more specifically about your needs, please get in touch with us at jamfsoftware.com. And if any of you happen to be if you're going to be coming to the area, we have our JAMF Nation User Conference coming up in October. It's a 3-day conference, all focused on Apple IT technology. Free to attend here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'd really encourage you to do that. But act now, because I know that tickets are going fast. So thank you. I hope that you have a great rest of your week and enjoy the day.